Hello backers, this is your special episode. We thought we'd do something that no one would watch if we put it on YouTube properly. So I'm sat here with my former Digitiser writer, Mr. Tim Moore, and we thought we'd get Jenny and Octav1us to do some sort of funny little interview with us.
Well, don't say funny, don't get their hopes up.
Just to keep it little. Little is good.
A little interview, 3 minutes tops. Go!
Well, I'm thrilled to be here because I can't believe that I'm in a Digitiser thing after all these years. How do you feel about this existing?
It's absurd, really, in some ways.
Yes.
It just seems ridiculous that this silly thing that we did purely for our own puerile entertainment is still a thing. 25 years. It's 25 years.
It is this year.
25 years.
This year.
You know, when Teletext is such a sort of bizarre medium anyway, and you never really, it's just sort of a one-way thing. You're putting this stuff out on this tiny little, 8-bitty kind of crappy screen, and somehow it's going, and you're given all these viewing figures. It's like, you're getting 1.7 million viewers, and we were obviously very proud of these figures at the same time while not believing them at all. It just didn't seem to make sense. And when you're watching Teletext, it's just a sort of, it's almost like a one-on-one thing, I suppose. You're not going to get your mates around, let's all sit around and watch Teletext. And yet somehow there were millions of people just on their own watching it, and it became, this momentum has somehow carried it on for a bloody century.
Well, we never had any real inkling of the fact that it was popular, because it was the post would come in every day. And it was only really when I left that I realised that people didn't want it to go away. It's now, really, you're going to go, well, OK, people must have liked it because it's endured in some weird way.
I think there's a lot of love for the very kind of bizarre humour that was very evident back in Digitiser.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I was saying to Tim earlier that I was genuinely terrified by quite a few of the characters used on the Digitiser thing, specifically the man's daddy, yes.
Oh.
Yeah. I was only about 7 years old, and I think the dark soulless eyes just genuinely upset me. In fact, I remember having a nightmare about it once.
Oh my God.
So
that would be the one that he's wearing today.
I know, being part of this show is proper PTSD inducing, I'm telling you right now. But one of my favourite things about the Digitiser thing is just the fact that you were just sort of mucking around and having a laugh. One of my favourite things is hearing the stories about what you used to get up to in the office. I hear that you were quite a bit naughty.
Well, it was always, because exactly, I was a married man. We were both married men, really. Well, we had kind of kids and stuff, and yeah, I would go and I would come home and tell my wife, "Oh, a really funny thing happened at school at work today," because it was like going to school without any lessons and sitting like a sort of gigantic rolling kind of endless school day where we would just piss about all day, like literally, making silly crank phone calls to other people in the office. throwing things, like, literally we'd go down to the market and get big bags of cherries and just throw them at people with this big, with this big divider, so we could get a nice angle over there.
There was the wall directly opposite where we sat. There was a cherry stain on that wall, I think, until the day I left. But I left, I don't know, it was the same year after you got booted out.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was later that year.
Oh, when you went and worked at home then?
Yes. Well, yes, when I worked at home. But yeah, it was, until that day. I mean, I've been up there 2 years, this cherry stain on the wall. One day we decided to throw cherries at Dave Hunter, who was doing the music pages. We also threw, actually it was after you left, we threw fake grapes at Bob Geldof, didn't we?
Don't try this at home, kids.
Yeah, no, do. Always throw plastic grapes at Bob Geldof if he's in your home. It's one guaranteed way to get him out.
Basically, it was, we're writing about video games like the most, graphically rich medium imaginable, and we're doing it on Teletext, which is the most graphically impoverished medium imaginable. So it was, actually Paul, I must say, because he is unbelievably good at doing this. This is how he kind of did things like this on Teletext. I've got a bit of food on the man daddy's, whatever that part of his strange body is there.
It's seepage.
And so he did do like an amazingly good Sonic the Hedgehog, for instance, which was quite impressive.
That was on day one, wasn't it?
But then, we've got so few characters. Well, we can like 80 words a page or whatever. You can't really say anything meaningful. So in the end, you might as well say something meaningless.
Did you ever think about it translating to TV or live action version at the time?
It was just the job that we happened to be doing at the time, really. It was not meant to be a long-term thing. That said, I so connected with what I was doing. It was such an important part of my life, I think. But I didn't realise that until later, years later, that I realised I was most at home in my own skin when I was doing Digitiser. There was something about that fit with it, with me and my psychological makeup that somehow worked. And plus, working with him, it was, it was like school.
I would literally, almost every day, be helplessly incapacitated with laughter, just like bent double under the desk, tears streaming down my face.
One of the really amusing things to me is the fact that it got to the stage where games companies were kind of falling over themselves to give you games and get good reviews and everything. Did that ever kind of humble you in any way, or did you just like to keep taking the piss?
Well, there were a few of them who really loved us. Yeah. We never got to the point. It's only now that there are people in the industry seemingly who remember Digitiser fondly, who weren't necessarily in the industry at the time, but who watched it on TV and now work in the game industry. But we never really got to that point where anyone, other than a tiny handful of companies, kind of fell over themselves to ingratiate themselves with us. We got to go to LA and so on.
Well, yes, we did.
But most of the time, we just felt like we were hated.
I suppose because we were so silly and actually also quite rude. We would, because obviously if you are beholden to these games companies because they're sending you the free consoles and the free, then you have to be nice about their games, and that was just that was the rule in the industry that was accepted. And because it started out with us literally having to buy all of our own consoles, well, actually not us, but Teletext did, and so on, and having to kind of borrow games from this video rental, kind of shop up the road, we were out of the loop there. We could be as rude as we liked about games. And that clearly went down badly. Plus, also the silliness. As I've discovered over the years, there is no such thing as the joke that everyone finds funny. And if you don't find it funny, it really gets on your tears. So we just, people just thought you silly arses.
All we could do was try and make ourselves laugh, which often a lot of the ways we would do that just didn't get on air.
Is there anything that you sort of look back on and you think maybe we were a bit too much of a knob?
Yeah.
Well, about 80% of it.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Well, what's the thing that most stick out when you think, oh, actually, if I go back, I would probably say.
In terms of things we did in the office.
Yeah.
The annoying Julian, the guy that used to do Bamboozle, if you remember that. He sat, and he was a really good friend of mine. I'd been to his wedding and stuff, and I'd worked previously at Ladbrokes Racing, and I'd got him the job at Teletext. I don't think we were quite as good friends by the end of the time at Teletext, but we would take turns to see who could shout the loudest without getting into trouble, or swear the loudest.
Actually, thinking about that was actually one of the first things when it started to all go a bit surreal and silly with the stuff we've done. Was just the stuff, the little strap lines across the bottom about Bamboozle.
Yeah, that might.
And we started putting kind of really quite offensive things about Bamboozle, which because that was him, he might have taken personally.
But there was also the one I really remember we had for some reason a tennis racket under the desk. It was a cardboard box. For some reason we had a tennis racket, and we would just, because we used to sit, Tim and I, with our backs to one another, and just occasionally this one day we decided this would be a thing for the day. So one of us would get the tennis racket and just go on the cardboard box, and Julian, because he's quite a sort of mild, he was quite a mild guy, lovely fella, but quite a mild bloke, and he never said anything, but he was just sitting there like that. Didn't stop us. I mean, that encouraged us to carry on doing it, but
because it was an open plan office, there were probably about, I don't know, 80 people working on this floor, 70 people or something. So, and we were behind a partition. Nonetheless, it was only a partition. It was about this high, and it must have been absolutely appalling for everyone else who was trying to, concentrate on their serious journalism type jobs. I mean, we were just sort of, banging things. Because we started off with when we discovered the feature on all. I remember it was particularly on the first one we did it with was the Jungle Book game. And they have all their little voice sampling in the kind of secret in the menu. So we just kind of to get on the little extension and call up someone else at office and sort of, it's Baloo the bear! Things like that. It was just hours of fun.
And not kind of like Friends or anything. Just we were doing it in the office. There was the sports desk we were doing it to, and we didn't get on with
really hated us.
Yeah. They were not, they were quite laddie kind of thing. They didn't get someone doing that. Not that there's anything to get, really. It's just irritating behaviour.
Did you set out to be like that? Did you have a brief when you started Digitiser, or did it just evolve in that way?
Oh no brief whatsoever. I mean, Tim was.
Well, mainly I was taken on as a features journalist, and then it came to Paul was the one that proposed having a kind of games.
Well, you were already writing like a page.
Well, sort of, but I was stymied by the fact that I didn't know anything about video games, and still don't. Sorry, everyone, but there we are. I was delighted when they said that somebody who did you kind of, it was your kind of proposal that put it all together. We didn't really have any contact with each other until that point. But we didn't have any. We were certainly not given. I mean, I knew bugger all about it, but I knew a little bit more than anyone else who was in a more senior position. So they never sort of said, "Oh, do this, do that." We just kind of put it together, and then we had this sort of number of pages that we had. I can see it was probably quite a useful resource if you were into gaming, which millions of people were, because we'd have a daily news thing, and we had more reviews and news than anyone else really. But at the same time, there were lots of pages where there was not much to do, so we started filling them with other things. Yeah. And then that slowly became the focus.
But it's weird, really, when you think about it, that you try and focus more on the facts and the information, and rather, you've only got a limited amount of space, but instead of doing that and trying to get as much information into a limited amount of lines, we just filled the stuff that had nothing to do with it.
So I remember one of the things that started out because you had such a small amount of space, but you wanted to fill in all of your 80 words, so there'd be like 4 characters left at the end. So Paul just started doing this, just at the end of it was completely mixed, and exclamation mark on the end of the page.
Yeah. There were times that the sub-editors wouldn't get.
But surprisingly few times, actually. Looking when I'd come home, it was always quite surreal coming home and seeing it on this really sombre, sober medium of Teletext, where people were just getting their sport headlines from, and you'd call our stuff up, and it was this sort of riot of kind of juvenile stupidity. And I would think, how the fuck did we get away with that? Repeatedly, really.
So kind of like in that theme, obviously back then there wasn't a comment section, but I understand you got some very angry letters sometimes. Is there any letters that really stand out to you as like, oh, this person is a mentalist, or did anyone send you like ham or something in the post?
The guy who said that we were spying on him through his TV and sent us letters covered in shit. That guy.
I thought it was going to be a nice whimsical response.
No, there was
someone sent us a cheesecake or something. And
So one of these competitions that just hold up random slogans in a variety of fun, and people would. Was Alex Garland, the famous creator of who wrote the Beach and 28 days later and everything else. He you know, in Thailand he sent us. It was actually from
Yeah.
Thailand when he was like.
It wasn't a
doing,
picture of him, it was his mate.
Right.
He took the photos top of a temple, where he was basically
when he
getting
was
the inspiration.
doing the beach, yeah.
Yeah.
But it seemed at the same time, I suppose it is a sort of culty type thing. And we had the idea that it was maybe like a couple of hundred people that were really into it, because they were the ones that sent us letters and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Well, we can call out. There's that gentleman sat over there. Chris Bell, do you want to come and join us?
sit on the
I'll
heron.
allow you just to displace the heron.
Are you all right being on this?
I am absolutely right, especially with the heron, because me and herons have history. And
Oh.
I'm very pleased
Well,
about
we
that.
may ask you about your heron history.
I will entrust you
sounds
then.
very
so
foreboding.
I will present you with
He
the
wobbles
heron.
around a lot in a kind of actually semi-animatronic way, which is quite good.
Semitronic. So, Chris, if you guys don't know, set up the first. It wasn't the first, but it was certainly the longest-serving Digitiser fan page.
Very nearly the first. As we recently discovered, Adrian Hond was the very first.
You found Adrian Hond?
Yeah, found him. But yeah, I started Superpage 58 in back in '97. It was just an assignment at uni, and they said 2 weeks, go away and make a website. I thought, well, what do I know about? What can I make a website about? Digitiser. Nobody else has done that. And so yeah, over a couple of weeks, I just set to putting as much as I could on the site. And there wasn't very much in those days online anyway, so it was just what I remembered essentially.
But it was. Sorry, I've taken over the interview now. So, but you can all ask Chris questions about anything you want. But it was. I just wanted to sort of call you up because we were talking about fans and Superpage 58 was really important to us because I think it showed us that there were people out there that loved what we were doing, even if it was just you. But
And had archived it and
and had archived it. Yeah. And because of the disposable nature of Teletext and the way the fast turnover with Digitiser, we didn't remember what we'd written from day to day. There was no going back over it. But you gave us that option of doing so, and we would just read it and laugh at our own jokes.
Were you recording that then? Were you recording it on VHS?
No, I was literally transcribing it by hand and then typing it all up. I had no technical solutions at all whatsoever, so it was all completely manual and Stone Age.
That's commitment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Weirdly, in recent years, I mean, last year when I did the series, Mr. Biffo's Found Footage, if you haven't seen it, please go and watch it on YouTube. And we worked with on that a group of comedians, which I know you know this story, a group of comedians called Asperger's or Us, who had done the subject of a documentary which is on Netflix, which is worth seeing, but bear in mind that it doesn't really do them justice because they're really lovely guys. And it paints them as, I don't know, they make it all about the disability rather than the fact that they're just comedians and that's what they want to be known as. But having seen the documentary already, I was then contacted by these guys out of the blue saying we're touring in England. Well, first of all, they asked me if I'd like to support them on tour, which was weird because I'm not a comedian, but they didn't know that. And it was like, what? Okay, this is a bit surreal. It's like people out of the TV coming and finding me. And it turned out that they, even though they're based in America, had become fans of Digitiser through Superpage 58. And they used to look up the man's daddy's jokes, and when we met up with them and I asked them to be in Found Footage, they played me a clip that they'd recorded or video that they'd made the previous weekend of them reading from Superpage 58 and pissing themselves laughing at the man's daddy's joke. And but that, it sounds like I'm taking pride in that. It's not really that. But you should. You made that happen.
That was one of my proudest moments. Is feeling like there was a two-way thing going on.
Yeah.
Because the man's daddy, he had a quite brief appearance originally in something like '95, for about a week or so, and then he disappeared. And people were writing saying, "We want more man's daddy. Bring him back." And you responded something like the man's daddy is going to come back, but he's not telling any more jokes. Something along those lines. And I can remember when I was doing the characters editor, writing about the man's daddy and how great he was and how lovely to have him back. And then once the site came to your attention, eventually you brought him back, and I felt like I'd in some way influenced that.
Wow, I didn't know that. You see, there's probably things
that's
that you
amazing.
know that I
That's
don't.
here now as well.
Well, actually, I can see what you mean, because he does. In fact, he is. And when first Paul was like sort of covered that, I said that is absolutely terrifying. Like, what is it? It's like it's a dead-eyed, like, you know, kind of skeleton something or other. It's
Anteater
Does
with a
look
wig
like
on.
Yeah, it does look like a melted aardvark.
it's the eyes. The eyes are just really, it's like bottomless pits of despair and misery.
And the later versions just look like some mutant ant thing.
Yeah, it got really scary, like genuinely very disturbing.
It was Dr. Derek Doctors, that was the character who
Yes.
was disturbing. that we had to, well, we got a complaint, didn't we?
Talking about things we used to get away with, yeah, it was like the Danny Taurus one was the...
yeah, that's the famous one, Danny Taurus. Do you know that story?
No.
Chris? You don't know the
I
Danny
don't know the
Taurus
Taurus
story? Well, I thought I'd told that before, where we were obsessed with this character in EastEnders called Danny Taurus, who was played by, was his name Billy Boyd or Billy... He used to be
remember.
like Basil Brush's handler, this guy in the 70s. that was what he'd been known for previously. And his character wore a wig. That was, you know, they made... There was always, remember this one weird bit in the Queen Vic where Danny Taurus had taken his wig off and put it on the Queen Vic's counter, and Phil Mitchell got the wig. And it was just right at the end of the scene. They'd had a scene, bit of dialogue, blah, blah, blah. Then he just got Danny Taurus's wig and gone... with it, and then they cut to the next scene. It was always really bizarre. Anyway, so it's really obsessed with Danny Taurus. And so someone did a graphic of Danny Taurus's wig, because we decided that we'd feature him as a character in place of the man and the man's daddy for a week. And he was up for at least a week, but his...
Over the course of the week.
Yeah, over the course of the week, his hair got gradually more in the shape of an erect penis.
To the point, that was one of those moments when I went home and I said to my wife, I said, look, she's got... I suppose it was the kind of the incremental way that it happened. Somehow
by the end of the week, there was
the sub-editors didn't even see it.
Snuck in.
When he looked at it through fresh eyes, it was just a man with a big cock on his head.
I really love that you sort of brought it home to your wife like a cat with a dead bird.
It's got a good analogy, really. But we got, because there was, you know, no taking photos and emailing them in back in those days. Someone wrote in and had drawn a picture of Danny Taurus with the cock on his head and had circled it with an arrow and put possible cock, question mark. And we thought, it's time to retire, Danny Taurus.
How penisy are we talking here?
Oh,
Did it
there was
have,
no by the end.
Fully, actually, that was a cock and balls, wasn't it? It was a sort of
you got the balls
flaccid
in there
cock
as
resting
well?
on a scrotum.
I mean, yeah, everyone goes on about the real turn of the worm being sick. Danny
Yeah.
Taurus was way worse.
Then you had Peel Backer, of course.
Peel back.
Oh, I don't want to know that.
I've totally taken over your interview.
What is this? What is
These are
it?
exclusive stories.
It's a Wookiee, but it also looks like something else.
What? Tell me what it is. Say it.
Tell me what
on,
it
It's
is.
of an anatomical bent that might happen if it's...
Say it. Say it up.
It looks like a cock with the foreskin pulled back.
Right. Bye, guys. I'm done.
Peel backer.
You've done it. You've done it. You've got what you wanted. Are you happy?
She's gone.
Are you happy now?
Yeah, she's gone.
I actually rest a little bit. I'm sorry. I had to because I thought I was going to be sick.
You're mean. About circumcision.
What am I doing with my life?
Yeah. So Peel Backer actually dated back to when I was at school. I can talk about this today because my daughter's not in, which she in previous days. But that was, I don't think I invented the name Peel Backer. I think it was a mate of mine that came up with the name Peel Backer. But I drew a picture of him at school, parting his front and peeling it back.
But it was things like that when you wondered, you know. I mean, I think that was after my time. I think Peel Backer. But why? I mean, you know, they had teams. It was a professionally run media organisation with teams of sub-editors who would look soberly through them, like, oh, it's like typo. That's what you say. Look, it's called Peel Backer, and look at him.
Wood for the trees.
Chris, any other favourite characters? Just one with.
Sorry.
I'm always very partial to phoning honey. The phone pranks were always a highlight.
I often get asked were they real or not, and they were. We even did them. We did them at your house one day that weren't even for broadcast. We just did some. we had like a computerised voice.
That was a very early version of one of those things where you could type and then get them to say the words. It was, you know, like Stephen Hawking type stuff, ordering pizzas and things.
We would always program it first of all so they didn't hang up. We was like, please do not hang up. This is my voice box.
And then then it was like, I need a special pizza. It must have.
You can hear them. Okay. Yep. That never gone through.
No.
Is there anything you wish you'd done before it ended?
Oh, you threw your coffee all over the computer, didn't you? So that,
Yeah, it's a bit feeble, wasn't it?
Well, did you do that? Did you have?
I did actually do
actually
that.
have a genuine paddy?
Well, no, I thought I might as well. I was like,
Nothing else to do.
and then they actually escorted me into the bike sheds because I thought I was going to sort of like, I don't know, like kick everyone's bikes over. Or something.
Behind them.
that story hasn't got any context, does it?
No,
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Just live with it. Live without the context.
Well, you've got 3 enormous fans of the show here.
I can't work out whether you're laughing or about to be sick.
And you've finished
Is it
off.
so like sort of
You finished off Octavius. So.
Yeah, I'm done.
Be proud of
This is it.
yourself.
Job done. Well, thank you, Chris, for doing
Thanks
that.
for having me.
Mentioning Bill Baffin. Bye.